into worship. So on Fridays, we typically do something that allows you to experience the message. And so this week, we were in James chapter 5 when we were talking about prayer. But one of the things that we talked about a lot on Monday and Wednesday is confession. And so Daniel and I are taking a risk here. I've never done this before. I'm a little nervous, but we're going to do a public confession with each other. So I'm going to pass it off to Daniel to give you a little bit more information about what that means.
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. So, there were two primary things we could have done. We could have either done an anointing, which might have been hard via Zoom. So probably better to do this confession, right? That was the other opportunity. So what I wanted to do was read from a Psalm of David kind of as a setup to remind us of the importance of confession, and then talk a little bit about sin, just generally speaking, and then let's confess. Let's kind of do that. So David writes a lot of Psalms, and one of them is Psalm 32, and I'm only going to read a part of it because it's a little longer. I'll read the first 5 verses, and it's about confession and the importance of it. So David says this: "Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sin is put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of guilt, whose lives are lived in complete honesty. When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away, and I groaned all day long. Day and night your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat. Finally, I confessed all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide my guilt. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone." Now, how cool is that? So David understood the power of confession and recognized the need of it. And I love that imagery that he listed about, and when I didn't do this, my body just kind of started wasting away. And I think there's a reality to that if we can't sort of share with one another and certainly to God our frailties and we hold it in, we begin to have some dilemmas and some problems, perhaps even physical manifestation. I wanted to highlight the nature of sin because sin is, of course, the reason we need to confess. Sin is where we fall short, where we miss God's mark. And you might recall several months ago, I think it was in May of last year, so gosh, it's been a year, we had a series called 7. It was about the 7 deadly sins, and those seem really big, but the point of that series was to identify the fact that we all sin on a daily basis. And not so much to beat ourselves up. I mean, we are sinful people and we need to own that, but we need to just also recognize it's a daily thing. It's not like we just have big sins sometimes like murder or thievery or adultery, but rather there are these other things that just happen day in and day out that we need to sort of remind ourselves that we need God's grace and God's love. And what I found fascinating, you highlighted for us, I believe it started on Monday when you said, James was actually encouraging us to confess to one another. And so that's what we're going to do today. And I'm recalling that in the recovery arena, for those who are in recovery, that it's literally one of the 12 steps, that we sort of make amends to each other. And we do that both for spiritual reasons, but also just for mental and emotional health reasons as well. And so we can find the richness of that when we do this. So I want us to, you and I, to spend a couple of moments confessing to one another. And, I have no idea what you're going to confess. I'm going to confess both what I would call sort of a big and a small thing, just as a way to sort of identify that that's what this can be. It can be sort of big and small, and we all identify things by relative terms, right? I mean, what it may seem big to me may be small to you. So I'm going to confess a sin this morning of gluttony. I have a real problem with food. It's one of the reasons I have to sort of work on my diet all the time, because I just love food, and when I see it, I love it, and if I see it, I want it. If I don't see it, I don't miss it, but if I see it, I want it. And I don't know that you've been in the workroom recently, but not only are Carlene's cookies there, but there's some great big Jimmy John's cookies. They're huge. And about 9:30 this morning, I ate one of those puppies, and it was way too big, way too large, way too many calories, and way too many carbs. And I didn't need it. I didn't really even want it, but I saw it, And so I, quote unquote, had to have it. And so, sister, forgive me, for I have sinned, right? And that's just a sin of gluttony. And it doesn't hurt anybody but me, but it's a need I have to offer that. The other is last night, Kay and I, and to a lesser extent, Sadie, kind of had some disagreement over some family tradition and things that we normally do in our house. And neither Kay nor I dealt with it very well with each other. And I was a little bit over the top with just sort of internal anger. I didn't burst out with my anger, but I clearly felt my anger and was feeling a bit, overwhelmed with that. And so in our conversations, we both kind of were at each other. And I didn't deal well with that. And I need to confess that it wasn't helpful the way we did that. Now, neither one of us raised our voices. Neither one of us were at each other's throats, but we were not the best. We were not at our best. And so I confess that as well. Sister, forgive me.
I forgive you. My confessions are a little different in that when I was thinking about the 7 deadly sins, thinking overarching ways and themes that I continuously miss the mark. And this has been weighing on me as we've been walking through the book of James, because plenty of this came up in the book of James. But there are 2 things specifically. The first being, lately, I feel like I have been extremely selfish in the sense that and James talked a lot about selfish ambition, but it's more of selfish protection. I have assumed that the world revolves around me, and I have put myself at the center of the universe. And so there have been a few things in my life recently that have kind of upset the cart of the way that I was functioning in the world, the way that I was living in the world, the way I was relating with other people in the world. And I kind of have developed this woe is me mentality, and a lot of the decisions that I've been making and the interactions that I've been having with other people have been really selfish. And so that's something that I am working on overcoming, and remembering that everybody's going through something. Everybody's experiencing turmoil during this time of COVID. Everybody has major life changes that are happening that they feel out of control. And I should not be placing my needs above the needs of others. So for that, I ask for forgiveness.
Indeed. Well, I know God forgives you for that.
The second thing that I constantly struggle with, and it hasn't just been a season, is my anger and my wrath. And this is something that really came up a lot during James, is that I speak before I think, without acknowledging the feelings of other people in the room, because I want to say what I want to say in the moment, it's a combination of selfishness too, but this is something that I often don't see the impact that my words have and how deeply I hurt people until it's too late. And for that, I ask for forgiveness, and I want to do better and repent of that.
Indeed. Isn't it amazing how just revealing can be helpful, right? It's sort of cathartic and a blessing in some ways. It's difficult, right? It's hard to sort of speak it, but it's both cathartic and helpful and spiritually strong. And again, I know God will forgive you for that, right? That God will claim that for you, as I know that God forgives me. And so part of this gift of confession is recognizing its wholeful, healthful giving to the soul. And I know I already feel better. I hope you already feel a little better. And even though there's this trepidation in speaking it, there's this gift when it's done. And so, like many things, whether physical practices or spiritual practices, they're difficult to step into, but they're a real blessing once we've done them. And it's our goal to try to get past the hurdle of the difficulty so that we can find the blessing after the fact. So thanks for confessing. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and this was, I was nervous about doing this. I do feel a lot better, but like Daniel mentioned, this is just one of the many spiritual practices that can help us grow closer to God and develop a better, stronger relationship with God. And so I really want to encourage y'all once again to go to tmumc.org/health check and take the spiritual health checkup. This is a great chance. So confession is a part of prayer in the way that Daniel and I did it. It's also a part of community. And so those are two of the 7 markers of spiritual growth. And so I'd really like for you to go to tmumc.org/health check and discover for yourself how you can grow in your faith by taking that assessment. But thank you so much for joining us on this Friday. I hope that you got something out of it, and maybe it inspires you to confess directly to God or to your family or neighbors where you just haven't lived up to the expectations that you have for yourself and that God has for you. So thank you, and we will see you again on Monday for more Go Beyond.